What's up, everyone? You're listening to Delayed Reaction. I'm your host, Lilo, and today we are going back to 2006 to talk about a movie that, funny enough, is actually fairly relevant to today. So, we are talking about the movie V for Vendetta, and this was directed by James McTeague and written by the Wachowskis. We all know who the Wachowskis are, right? Matrix fame. Stars Hugo Weaving and Natalie Portman. So, okay. Here's why this movie is timely. First off, before we dive in, consider this your spoiler warning for a movie that is 22 years old. Or 18 years old. If you haven't seen it, now's your chance. Go ahead and check it out. I had to watch it on Amazon Prime. So if you're a Prime member, you can see it there with your subscription. Otherwise, you might have to rent it or buy it or something like that. But spoiler warning, go check it out. Pause the podcast. When you're done, come back. Okay, you back? Great. Let's dive in. Okay, so first and foremost, V for Vendetta is a movie based on a graphic novel that was released in the 80s. I believe 1988 was the first run. Written by Alan Moore and one other gentleman. I can't recall his name. But Alan Moore, prolific comic book writer, wrote some of the most epic stories, including The Dark Knight and Watchmen, most notably. The story itself is incredible, right? Like the source material is fantastic. The movie, in true book to movie adaptation, follows the story sort of, takes a lot of creative liberties in order to make it fit into 2 hours. Also, they tried to tie it so that it's more modern for 2006. And they also altered some of it because, admittedly, there is a part of the story that's a little weird, which I'll get into here in just a sec. The story goes, V, the titular protagonist, is trying to overthrow a totalitarian dictatorship running England in an unnamed future. I can't recall what the year was for the future. I'll tag it somewhere in here. But essentially, England's government has fallen. The world itself has fallen into disarray. There was a massive war. In the comic book, it was a nuclear war that had wiped out pretty much everything. And a religious-backed political party came into power, where the only way to restore order was to rule with a heavy fist. You find out through both the book and the movie that V was experimented on, trying to find some kind of biological weapon. And because of these experiments, he gains superhuman abilities in terms of speed and strength. And during the process, he ends up really realizing that, one, those experiments were awful to him and the people that they killed, and two, that it was government funded. And because it was government funded, he had to take down the entire government to get revenge because of the experiments. So, pretty standard plot line. He goes through his plan. Both the book and the movie take about a year in order for it to progress throughout the entire story. The first scenes in the movie are pretty great, though. He blows up a parliament building on the 5th of November, and that essentially starts his entire campaign to overthrow this government that he's taken years and years to develop and work out. So during this time, he meets a woman named Evey Hammond, who's played by Natalie Portman in the movie. In the book, she is a 16-year-old orphan. She tries to make money because, totalitarian government, lower-class citizens have less money and less means for living, so she turns to essentially prostitution in order to try and make a living. her first go out in both the movie and the comic. Her first night out, she runs into some government fingermen, as they're called, essentially secret police enforcer types. She gets into a lot of trouble. They take it upon themselves to almost do really bad things to her. That's when V steps in and essentially kills a couple of the dudes, knocks out some other people in no time flat. He takes her back to his little quote-unquote bat cave, where he has acquired a ton of old cultural items. And this is everything from classic paintings and books and music to movies that are deemed inappropriate, right? So he has kind of like this little oasis, like this cultural oasis amidst this overarching totalitarian government. As the movie goes on, here's where we're kind of diverge and just talk about the movie. As the movie goes on, you see him kind of start to incite small little riots. Meanwhile, the government is trying to figure out who this person is, what he wants. Oh, excuse me, not little riots. He actually goes through and he's systematically murdering these people that were involved in the experiments on him at this facility. So at first it seems like it's just some random murders, but then as the police start to dig in a little bit more, they find out that all the people that he's killing were involved with these experiments. And of course, in true comic book fashion, these people are just awful. Just like the absolute worst of the worst types of human scum, right? Until he gets to one doctor who is interesting. She actually expresses remorse for what she's done, and she reveals to V that she'd actually been expecting him to come and kill her, and he knows this, and because of that, he actually goes and mercifully kills her in like an act of kindness, I guess. It's the secondary story, or the B plot line on this, is Evey Hammond. She doesn't have much to, fall back on. She's trying to find something to latch on to. V comes in and like exposes her to all these things, and she kind of understands it and she kind of gets it. But as he's going through these murders, she starts to realize that she doesn't want to be part of these murders because of the act of murdering. It isn't until this really wild turn where, and this is kind of where the movie takes a turn for me as well. There is a moment towards maybe like the latter half of the movie, we'll say, where Evey gets kidnapped by secret police, we think. And she is being questioned and she's being interrogated to reveal the identity of V and what his motives are and where they can find him. And she's being tortured through all this stuff. But rather than give up the identity of V or his location, she decides that, you know what, this is actually a cause that she is willing to die for, because she is finally without fear and she's like, you know what, this is kind of the righteous cause. And because of that, it's revealed that the secret police that kidnapped Evey was actually V himself, trying to push her to that point. And for me, like, that felt a little odd, because you have this heavy-handed government that's trying to control everyone else's thoughts and actions, and you have V, who's supposed to be this righteous freedom fighter. But instead of letting Evey kind of follow her own path, he literally forces her down the same path that he's on. And so because of this, she follows in his footsteps and she takes on the same ideals as V, to the tune of carrying out V's final plan of blowing up the British Parliament building. Like the big Parliament building. So V goes through, kills the last person on his list, and he gets beat up, and of course he dies. and it's left to Evey to try and carry out the rest of his plans, which she does with just spectacular fervor after realizing that she was tortured into becoming. Well, actually, she doesn't even realize it. She just does the bidding of V, no big deal, and carries out his legacy. So that's essentially the story. He overthrows the totalitarian government in the end through Evie's hand. That's the quote-unquote happy ending for the movie. So there were some interesting bits throughout the movie. One thing, like one of the divergences that I thought was interesting from the graphic novels to the movie was in the excuse me, in the graphic novel, there are parts of the government that are referred to in body parts, which I found interesting. Like it's supposed to illustrate the entire overarching nature of the government, right? So it's like there's the head and the eye and the nose, which was interesting, and the ears and the mouth, of course. Like the mouth is the big propaganda machine, right? Ears are the spies. Eyes are also spies. They take all of that out of the movie and instead just have like the various actors or the various players of the government being referred to by name. There is one part as well. Stephen Fry's character, I believe his name is Gordon in the movie. He says a line that goes, "You spend so long behind a mask that you forget who you were before it." And I thought that was interesting. And it kind of lays out like the whole idea of V and then of Evey going forward, right? Where it's like you think you're this one thing because of this identity that you've taken on, and you forget where you came from in order to get to that thing. So I thought that was actually pretty cool, pretty interesting, because like I said, at the end, Evie's a completely different person, where she's not even the same timid little person that she was at the beginning of the movie. She's now become a terrorist in some regards. So I said at the top of the show, this is extraordinarily timely in 2024, given the political environment that we're in, right? Both the movie and the graphic novel kind of serve as potential warnings for extremist thought, right? With the British Parliament as it was in the movie, they're so far into the idea of control that it becomes like this complete fascist regime, and they oversee everything, total control over everything. There are some points in the comic book which were interesting. There's actually a line at the very beginning of the comic books where I think it's the head or like the main person running British government, where he literally says the words, "Make England great again." And that felt so odd and gnarly to read, given that was written in 1988. And now here we are for the second time over, someone's using the exact same phrasing. So it felt very strange, just almost like our current president has pulled plays out of a comic book in order to get to where he's at. But it just felt so timely to watch this movie, so I had to do it. But anyway, overall, I'd say my complete ranking for this was going to be 3 out of 5. It was good. There was a lot of really cool sequences, a lot of really great intrigue and kind of spycraft. Hugo Weaving himself was pretty awesome. Natalie Portman pulls out this British accent, which is fairly believable. I mean, like, if I were to rate her accent just alone, 4 out of 5 for sure. Oh, at the end, there's one like big fight scene with V where he takes on, I think, about a dozen guards, maybe less. He runs through and he offs all of them. But the way that it's filmed feels really chaotic in a way that like most kind of action films don't typically follow. There's a lot of sharp cuts between movements to make it look like V is literally all over the place, but when you're watching it, it feels like they're just like cutting together a bunch of film, which they are, but I don't think that's what they were going for. Also, the blood effects, this is super nitpicky, I realize, but the blood effects were very odd. Felt strange. I mean, like a little almost too comic book, a little too practical special effects, but like, I don't know, felt strange, felt odd. But then there were also moments where I couldn't quite follow what was happening. And I'm not sure if that was because I was confusing the book and the movie storylines, or if the movie itself was just kind of disjointed to the tune where like I couldn't follow the forward momentum of the movie. So I don't know. Overall, 3 out of 5. That's what I'm gonna give it. But let me know what you think. Absolutely happy to see what your thoughts were in the comments. What would you give this movie on a scale of 1 to 5, right? So, yep, put them in the comments below. Happy to continue talking there. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time.